This is Take Notes with Jen Rafferty, where we move music education in new directions. I'm your host, Jen Rafferty, a music educator, author, and huge social science nerd, and I am so excited to go on this journey with you as we highlight the intersection between music education and the social sciences. Hello, and welcome back to Take Notes. On this week's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with David Knott, who is a professional percussionist, educational leadership advocate, and professional conductor. David currently serves as a member of the instrumental music faculty at what he describes the sweetest band gig on earth, where he coordinates and directs all middle division band activities at Milton Hershey School in Hershey, Pennsylvania. In 2020, Mr. Knott joined the summer music faculty at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, where he developed and now instructs a class on tactical integration of trauma-informed and social-emotional learning strategies for music education. As a leadership advocate, he founded the Central Pennsylvania Wind Conductors Society, whose mission is to provide a forum to elevate individual music educators through mentoring, professional collaboration, and performance opportunities for student ensembles. We had a wonderful conversation about SEL tactics in the music classroom, and by giving students voice and choice while still maintaining the integrity of the curriculum. Because when we focus on the process, it truly makes a difference on how they perform. We also talked about the importance of finding your mission and vision and how it truly helps us all connect with each other as colleagues and with our students. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. What kinds of things brought you to this passion about SEL in the music classroom?
Sure. That's a great question. And I think everybody's journey to SEL is a little bit different. And that's one of the things that really makes SEL and especially music education so special. What drew me to it, along with just my passion to recreate the feeling that I got in music, which I think most of us can probably agree is we had a really great experience, so we want to try and share that with others. What drew me into the SEL classroom focus with my music is thinking about all the different times when I've been in classroom situations or hearing people talk about situations in music where they didn't always feel they were championed or had the best response. And SEL gives us a great way to reach other music educators professionally and then work with our students to help them be able to find their best self through music. It's always been my passion with music to create, we would call it in college, it was referred to as, we want our students to have a significant musical experience, playing a piece of music that just connects with you so much that you go, oh, I love music because I played Mahler 1 with a college festival orchestra, or, Eric Whitaker's October in high school, or just some rock and roll tune in middle school band where you got to improvise on a blues scale. We can connect and try and make our kids connect with music, but when we can make them connect with their more deep soul and more personal, it doesn't have to be the music. It can be the connection of the people and that journey of the people. And that's where I'm really finding myself pivoting as a musician and a music educator, is getting more and deep into the journey as opposed to the product.
So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's such an important differentiation between what I think of like as old school music teaching and music education versus where we're shifting now towards this student-focused, student-centered classroom where it isn't about product, it's about process. But at the same time, as musicians, we have this product, this very public product. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in this thing. And so I guess my question is maybe, how do you do that in the classroom? And has COVID shifted that perspective for you in some way?
Yes, to the COVID, for sure. Without having any live products, we still have to make it meaningful. And without having any concerts last year and having to make all these different iterations, and for my situation, we didn't even have large group rehearsals. We were just iterated all the way down to small settings where we could be socially distanced and mitigated and bell covers and all those things. We had to make a shift to the process and making the process meaningful and inviting to the student. The question being, how do we get to a process focus and getting away from the product? So that got easier for me when I became a middle school teacher. As a high school teacher, with all the marching band and the competitions and everything, really working to grow to that end product, taking kids to district band, kids that were auditioning for high-level ensembles, it was a lot easier to get a good product at the end and even a great product at the end. When I came into my career as a middle school teacher, the journey to getting to that concert was a lot harder. And to be able to not get frustrated in the process, I had to learn to be better in the process, make better systems in the process, make smaller steps in the process to celebrate. And in high school, we would have recording sessions. And in middle school, as an assessment tool, we would have micro sessions. So it's microphone, still a recording session, but they're real little. And it allowed for us to create, in just one way, to create a process-oriented evaluation and little wins along the way. So we could see product and growth and didn't have to wait till the concert to see growth and put everything into that end concert. We had little wins along the way and incorporated other just fun games of making more formative type events throughout, as opposed to just saying, okay, the concert's the end thing.
So, I think it's interesting that you said that shift happened when you transitioned to being a middle school teacher, because in some way, and the way our public school system in regard to music education is designed, there's high stakes in high school.
Right.
And there seems to be these lower stakes in middle school. But what's really interesting to me as a diehard, fierce advocate for middle school education and middle school model, the stakes are much higher in middle school. And to do middle school correctly, by the way that you're explaining, creates better performers at the high school level. So I wondered, have you been able to see that? And as the feeder program, has the high school group been different because of their experiences now in middle school?
There was a moment, I cannot recall how many years ago. I've been here 14 years. So somewhere around year 7, when we had a middle school move up event with the marching band. And I just remember that specific event. Like I said, I can't think of the exact year, but there was a time when I became better here at the middle school, because I had pivoted to teaching music education through performance, not to quote the book, but became in that process oriented and less of a conductor, more of a music teacher again. By about year 7, we could hear the marching band change the sound. All of a sudden, I just remember it was the first time I heard the high school band in that year. And it's like, that sounds like our kids at the middle school. I now hear the transition. And they continue to be successful in their own way. Every school has their unique challenges, but the sound and the process definitely became different, and we could hear it clearly in how the band had evolved. It's sometimes nice to not hear them all the time because we're, across town from each other. But when you can hear that sound come through, it's like, my work is making a difference. I'm now finally hearing it, because the sound of the band was different, completely different than it had been a couple of years prior.
And that's something that as teachers, especially trying something new, we often get caught up. We want results now. Is this working? Where's the data? But the data comes later, because we're planting seeds. right? Like we're not fishing, we're
Right.
planting seeds, and that it takes time for it to grow and evolve and learn. And something you said that I want to also get back to is this idea of creating systems and steps. Because as a teacher, for someone who might be listening, who's maybe hedging about whether or not to go more into this process versus this performance, and everyone had to do this last year, and hopefully we all learned something from it. But what kinds of systems and steps specifically, like concretely, works for you as those formative check-in points that were helpful for the kids for that self-reflection, that ownership and embodiment of the learning process?
Well, I know you're familiar with this. Probably all of our listeners at some point have heard of like recorder karate. And a lot of us that are listening have done like band karate. That is an example of just one type of system that I've incorporated into my middle school band program a few years ago now, that has helped create the structure. And so what I mean by that is, we all know with that system, it's the belt level system. It really breaks down the progression. And the system that worked best for me to start the transition was moving away from the lesson book approach that, we go through the lesson book, we work through it. And that's, some people might say, well, that's my curriculum. Sixth grade, our curriculum is we finish book 1, or maybe we start book 2. The systems that I put in place was taking the time to really map out what my lessons need to look like, as specific as possible, and get really tactical with my approach. So my 5th grade band has, like everyone has, a curriculum, but we have really good, clear breakdown of what's going to happen in the first marking period, second marking period, third marking period. And we use, ed list techniques. We use scale charts, and we keep refining our approaches to meet our kids where they are, so that when we're coming into our program, everyone's getting the same routine with a bit of iterations for their individuals. And those systems that we put in place, like a scale chart system, ensures that we are covering all the basic things that we want to utilize throughout the time in middle school. One of the new iterations and systems we're putting in is all the students are going to learn how to play drums, and that's this drumming system. That's where we're going to make it as a way to reinforce our rhythmic education. So every chair in the rehearsal room, now the rehearsal groups are smaller because we're still mitigating, but they all have a drum pad, and we'll have in our large, not so large, smaller, but our bigger group rehearsals this year, kids will all play drums to develop our counting system. So instead of just playing on the instrument, we're going to let them play it on their drum to get more physical motion and to keep piquing and sparking curiosity.
So with that, sparking of curiosity, can you talk then about how SEL is then woven into those lessons and that curriculum that you just described?
Sure. Well, one of the things that's a major part of our SEL is a lot of focus in the beginning of the year on self, and having the students really look at their abilities on their instrument and itemize out what are they good at. And we do a project at the beginning of the year with SEL called What Does My A Sound Like? And so they will talk about how do they feel that they can best earn an A in the class, looking at what their schedules are, what their sports schedules are, their strengths in their core classrooms, how much time can they put into their instrument. And so we really spend time focusing on, where are you as a player right now? What are you strong at? What do you need to develop? And let them have autonomy, agency, ownership of where they want to go within the marking period. So that's one way that we start with the SEL. Then we spend some time throughout the year focusing on others and working in the small groups. So their lesson groups will go from individualized focus to then focusing on playing chamber groups together. And then towards the end, we start letting them make their own decisions on what they want to do and how they want to demonstrate their assessments, where they want to do assessments with a partner or through video or play just for us, one-on-one. And we try and make the kids have as many options as possible without losing the integrity of our curriculum.
So have you found that, and in what ways have you found that perhaps these students, how do I want to say this? The students have some sort of effects on what you then do with the curriculum from year to year? Does that happen occasionally? And if so, how?
Well, the students definitely have an impact, and they have a profound impact on the curriculum. Case in point, this year, when we've having started our lessons, hearing where the students that are coming in for their first lesson and what they've retained and where they are, we have the flexibility to maybe start in a different part of a book, move forward. Like for some of our clarinet students, they retain their upper register so well, we pivoted forward and moved into, we're not going to start with our scales. We're going to go right into reviewing our high register studies because they retain so much. And it gives them some choice. Sometimes we have students that come in and they like being in the program, but they want to try a different instrument. And we have some flexibility to let them even sometimes try a second instrument and work up some strategies with them of 3 days on your primary instrument, and then we can try a secondary instrument. So those are just a couple ways that we do that.
Sure. And I'm hearing you say we a lot. So I want to talk about that too. So, because this is a challenge, this is a very serious obstacle for a lot of teachers who are trying to implement a lot of the things that you're talking about, but work with colleagues who are not so willing to make changes. So I'm assuming you're talking about colleagues of yours who are in this together.
Correct.
So how have you been able to foster this relationship so that you are on the same page and moving forward to this common vision and living out this mission?
Right. That's a great question. And we're lucky here because we have two people, myself as the primary teacher, the band director, if you will. And then we have a part-time music teacher who is assigned to this building with me. And in other years, there may be, if there's a need, we may have two part-time teachers, but generally each division, elementary band, middle school band, high school band at our school has an assistant for the band director. And that has allowed us to keep our lesson groups smaller so that we can individualize the attention. And also the bonus with that is if I'm teaching 2 or 3 kids in my lesson group and the other music teacher has 2 or 3, we can strategically put them in the lesson rotation, that now we have this really great little trio that I'm working with, but now we also have a great, octet or sextet or whatever, depending on the kids. So it gives us opportunity to do individual or ensemble iterations. But what it took was time to sit down and myself as a teacher to really know what is my mission to teach with the students. And as I worked through the old school, what's my philosophy of education, I kept working it down into different ways of streamlining it. And I landed on the term elevate. And so like our school's theme is stronger together. And our band's theme over the past couple of years has been elevating students one note at a time. So we are going to elevate our kids to their next best self, one note at a time. Obviously, that works great with music, right? And by having a really clear mission and philosophy, it's been so much easier to connect with our high school staff, our part-time staff, our elementary staff, because it comes right back to what's the mission? Elevate our students one note at a time, not make Midwest and perform at Midwest or PMEA. We're elevating that kid one note at a time. I had a student actually come today for her lesson. She's playing xylophone, and came and said, I'd really like to try the trumpet this year. Now, as a seventh grader, do you want to go back to that day one? And I had a space that it would work. Back to that philosophy, elevate the student one note at a time. And I said, let's get out a trumpet. We can try it today. Let's see. And we sat down and we made it work, and we'll see. I gave her 4 weeks. I said, you can have 4 weeks. If it doesn't work, we'll come back to the xylophone. But if we had that old school model of got to get to the concert, how do you take a kid out of your band that's been playing now? This would have been her, third year, second and a half actually, but then put her back at a fourth grade level. Doesn't fit the band concert goal, but it fits the mission.
I'm so glad you said this, because this is really the crux of the work that I do, and the whole reason that I do what I do. Because if you aren't mission driven, then what are you doing? Like everyone's just kind of going off in all these directions, especially in a department where, to use your words, you are stronger together. It's actually vital for your survival as a music department that you are together in a united front. And it's amazing to me how many departments don't have a collective mission. And I've seen the power of that through your story, through just a small handful of other people's experience, where in a mission-driven departments, there's common language. You all have some sense of being on the same page. So even though you might disagree on a couple of the details, we're all, essentially doing the same thing, and being able to move forward for the benefit of your students, because that's ultimately what this is all about.
Yes. And there's so many stakeholders, as we all know, in music education. We're talking specifically connecting with the music team, me and my part-time music teacher. And then as that scaffolds and spirals out around, we have, the global school mission, but since every department has their own things that they have to accomplish, for us to have that reminder when challenges arise and obstacles come in front of us, to look at the obstacles as opportunities instead of roadblocks. And when we don't have, and I know when I didn't have this really precise mission, I might have had a different mission statement or from a different position at a different time in my career. Really having it so concrete to that one word concept. And that one word concept has been floating around the social media education market a lot. I've seen that a lot more this past year than I have. I've used this for a couple years now, but it helps keep reminding us that it's there. We hear this phrase for the kids, like, Thon, Penn State, for the kids. That's absolutely right. And when we can remind ourselves, however it works best for us to remind ourselves, let's just go one note at a time. Just keep making that forward progress. I can disagree with my colleague, my high school colleague, but when we have this common mission, this common goal, we're no longer disagreeing. We're just coming up with alternative ideas, because the disagreement's gone. It's just yes, instead of going yes, but I think this. It's yes, and how about this? And it just makes everything so much more growth minded. And I'm going to not ramble, but I want to go a little bit more on this. There's a lot of talk because with doing the SEL stuff and reading, books on trauma and with students and with the different ways people and kids are raised, and doing the research for my class. One of these interesting books that I'm just diving into is called The Boy Crisis. And it's talking about how needs of boys and raising boys is different in today's world than 1950 as society has changed. And what was really interesting in that book as it relates to what we're talking about, it mentions how an old model for boys is you get a job, you make money, you progress through finding a purpose, and then that purpose leads to a mission. And as I was reading through that, I thought about that's an exact conversation that we can have in our music classrooms, just kind of flipping it, so to speak. When we have our mission to elevate students, we can then break it down to, okay, we're elevating students, but what's our purpose? We can break that down. What's the money of the band? Having a great concert, learning a recording session piece and hearing a product, sharing with people. There's your currency. Going to a festival, getting a rating. What's the job? Maybe the jobs can be, the concert and different things. So it's a mindset when we're thinking of how do I get my kids in band ready for life and career. If we really have a good mission and purpose and a structure, we've set them up to see what a positive life looks like just by coming to band without even knowing that we did it. And then when we know it, it makes it even more purposeful.
100%. Because at the end of the day, you teach kids 21st century life skills through music.
Correct.
You're not teaching music.
Music's our vehicle. And I know there's people in music ed that go, well, we need to teach music for music. Why can't it be both? There's that yes and instead of yes or.
From where I'm standing, it is yes and. But if you really want to go toe to toe with me about that, I'm not saying you, but if someone who wants to go toe to toe with me about this, you have to teach, in order to teach the music, you have to teach kids, and we're in a business of education. So we have to know who the kids are to teach them. And we have to be able to give them the skills that they need to grow up as productive people in our society. And we get to do this through this beautiful thing called music, because we're not going to be able to just teach music. That's not our job. That's not our job. If you want to do that after school and an extracurricular, awesome. You want to do that with lifelong learners, like, in community choir, awesome, or bands, whatever. But when you're in a school, you are a public servant, and your job is to teach kids 21st century school skills through your content area. And I feel very strongly about that. And while it is an interesting discourse to have with people who say no music for music's sake, but I hear what you're saying, and I've talked with so many passionate music educators about the deep down of what we do, and none of it really has to do with music making. We're so lucky that we get to do it through music making, because it's one of the most beautiful ways we get to reach kids and make connection. But when it comes down to it, it's about, like you said, teaching kids how to be their best selves. It's about connection. It's about relationships. It's about all of that stuff, which it's what we're supposed to do.
There was those times when you're learning your repertoire for school, and this is what you're going to do with your kids in band. And we have all the state lists and national lists and all that. And then I remember a colleague taking a new position and talking about their library, and the middle school band library had highlights from Debbie Gibson. And we laughed. It's like, who would choose that? And then as I've gotten older and become more into my SEL and just more student-centered, I can see why somebody might choose to do that, where others would be like, you'd never get me to do that. Well, there's a purpose for it. And our students may not now connect with highlights from Debbie Gibson, but there might be something that they are familiar with that hits them in a way that allows them to build all of these skills, musical skills, life skills, career-based skills. It doesn't always have to be the grade 4.5 off of the Florida band list. It could be just something that's a little lighter fare that allows your audience and all stakeholders to connect. Maybe that one kid in the audience go, oh, I know that song. Maybe I should join band. And I think we can all agree, we don't want a whole diet of just pop tunes, but we have to be open to more ideas. I think that's why we see the modern band movement starting to take off, trying to find a new way. I just bought a digital mallet instrument for my classroom. I'm getting it together and stuff, because with the COVID and having to have smaller groups, what a great way to ensure that I have maybe a sound that's missing, but also to be a 21st century skill of digital music and getting a kid to now go, I need to go into and reset my computer settings as opposed to just playing the traditional xylophone. I love both, So yes, and.
It provides this open space where everyone's voice is heard. But not everyone knows that rule. So
right,
creating a culture of yes and can be so powerful in a little microcosm of a music department.
And then the kids coming out of our program can be that leader, natural leader in the group. With my jazz band, we do a improvisation activity, and we have a whole unit, and we have systems involved, but it starts with an activity that I got from Tim Ferriss called fear setting from one of his TED Talks.
Okay.
And instead of setting a goal for improvisation, we set, what am I afraid of for improvisation, and talk about what we're afraid of. And that gets into jigsawing and pairing and sharing and moving around the room and talking to each other. Gets into a fear gallery, and they list their fears, and the kids walk around over a course of different rehearsals and go, that fear says I'm afraid, and this is one that actually comes up, that I'll solo and my instrument will fall apart. So then the kids will take sticky notes or markers or whatever, however I set up the fear gallery, and they can write solutions and share their solutions. Or, oh, I got a solution for this fear of not knowing what note to start on, and they'll write a solution. And part of that also, going to what we're saying with, discourse and not being sure of people hearing us, in that unit, one of the things that they listen to is a TED Talk of Stefan Harris, the jazz vibraphone player. And he talks about playing wrong notes in jazz. And one of the things he says is you can keep playing that wrong note until it becomes a right note. So as we're working to become more tactical in our classroom, or more student-oriented or more process-oriented, the mistakes all of a sudden can become the real gems of the improvisation or of the journey of the lesson. And I've been using the word tactical a couple of times, because with my SEL class, it's a tactical approach to trauma-informed music education and SEL, because every situation's fluid, every situation's different. I cannot tell you, this is how you do SEL in your classroom. I don't know your classroom. I don't know your students, but I can help you find that journey to it. And if we can all funnel all these ideas that we hear, funnel something through from this podcast, and put them all together to find that one gem, just make that one little step forward and try something new. Maybe it's going to be a wrong note for the first couple of weeks, but the more we figure out how to use it in the line, use it into our delivery of our curriculum, into our connection with our students, that wrong note all of a sudden could be the blossom that makes the most amazing improvisation ever.
So can you talk a little bit more about that tactical approach to this musical SEL? Because that's kind of what I want, like the juicy stuff that's a little bit different about what you do with your classroom. And you've kind of alluded to this with your examples that you've given all along, but what are some of these approaches that you use that you have found to be really successful with your students?
With my students? Well, first of all, the tactical approach, again, is looking at what's the school mission? with SEL and all the ways that they want us to approach it, and then coming down to how do I get there in my classroom. So that's that. We're funneling it all down to I'm with my kids. So first thing that I do with my classroom is I understand that SEL is approached two different ways by some people. You can do your stop, drop, and teach your SEL lesson. So today we're gonna cover, like we might say, maybe the theme for the school's commitment to mission. And we're going to do a self-reflection on how am I committed to being excellent in band. So we can stop, drop, and do. And those are okay because they can hit goals and they can be targeted and pinpointed. At this point, we're gonna stop and do that. And we all can say we probably have used those where we're gonna have a concert reflection for SEL. What I want to do in my classroom is embed it, integrate it, so that you don't ever know that I'm teaching it because it's happening intentionally all the time. So what do? One, I do is having the kids do constant reflections on what did you do good today? What did you do well? And it's simple like that. So they can self-reflect what's going well. I make sure that in our lessons, we not only have one-on-one lessons or even group lessons where we're, the traditional sectional, but to make sure that we're spending time with others. And that whole mindset of building with others is we build in specific points where we're not stopping and teaching SEL, but we're having them work with partners. So they have to work on the strategies of connecting and communicating with others. Other things that we do is we recognize as a program that we have SEL is also a part of our community. So when we look at the castle wheel, we have teachers and schools, but when you get to that outer part of that castle wheel graphic that we've all seen, that stakeholder of community, we as music educators, we talk about advocacy and why music. Well, building SEL advocacy to our community is so important. So we have a Twitter page for our community to see our group. I spend time with writing note cards throughout the year and sending them to every parent, or we call them sponsors since we're a residential school, parent, guardian, sponsor, to highlight what the student is doing well. So I'm hitting my community, but I'm also building that connection, that kind of triangulated relationship with the student, so that they'll hopefully get a phone call or an email or something from a parent when they see their sponsor that says, hey, I got this great card about you. I'm so proud of you. So we create the connection with others and with the kids by reaching out to our community as much as possible. And as far as like saying, what are like these 5 really, pillars of our SEL, they're all really small moments as opposed to having these big SEL projects. We do a big SEL projects throughout the year, but the focus is trying to connect with the kid, and not even so much of like building these relationships of, hey, we're going to go out here and let's be partners and friends and stuff, but building this great level of respect for the student. Let them feel completely respected. So I'm focusing on giving them the highest amount of respect that I can, and let that be the vehicle for the relationship. Like with the student today with the trumpet, respecting that student wanting to try something. So I respected her instead of that December concert that's be here before we know it, but it's a long way away for her.
Yeah. And it's that paradigm shift.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, and I told you I was going to ask you this, what then is your big dream for music education? My big dream for music education has shifted over the years, from my personal goals. And I can
confidently say that my dream for music education now is to have all music educators understand that every word they say impacts somebody in their room, and they should never forget that. It can be a moment of such great connection that we will never see. So my hope for music education, and I have faith we're going to get there. I don't just have hope. I have faith. We're going to get there because people like you that are having podcasts and people that are trying to develop more and more professionally and personally, it's just remembering everything you say is being heard, and you'll never know who you impact. So be super mindful and know that every kid is listening and is important and should be treated as the precious gifts that they are.
It's so wonderful to hear the answers to these questions, because collectively there's this beautiful utopia now that exists in my head about like what you said and this person said and this person said, this person said, and there's just this place. And I do also have faith and hope that we are working towards that, because there are pockets of people who are fierce zealots trying to make this a reality, not just in their world, but expanding it. And I think that's something else that COVID highlighted for us, that we are in a global community and we can share ideas with each other so easily now that something like this isn't so far-fetched anymore.
No, and we can all have different approaches. Hence, again, back to that tactical. And it's okay if I choose to do something different than you. The idea is my how doesn't have to be the same as anyone else. It's our whys that need to be the same, the same goal. And the way you get to your why and my why, we're all there. We want kids to love music. I use the idea, elevate them one note at a time, but really what are we doing? We want them to love music. We want them to come back tomorrow and keep playing and not become the building principal of a school 20 years from now and say, music sucked for me. And I'm sure we all have stories. I have stories. I'm not going to, the traumas that I've experienced, through the arts and others, those don't need to be shared, but we don't need to create more of them. And yeah. So all our hows will look different.
Yeah, we're in a position to really build something beautiful.
Yeah. Arguing over, are we going to use Gordon syllables or Kodai syllables? If that's all we have to argue about, we're in a really good place, and we should actually celebrate that. That's all we're talking about today.
And hopefully even that discourse will go well, because if you both agree on your why, there should, I remember there was there was some sort of educational consulting group that came through, like how they usually do. And there was this woman who was talking to the whole music department, but I was the chair of the department at this point. So like we were a highly effective and efficient team. Like, so, she didn't have to do anything. She was like sitting in the corner over there. And the 13 of us were able to have some very difficult conversations where we disagreed about some things. And it was beautiful to watch, because while, we disagreed about this thing, we fundamentally agreed about what we were doing. So this little thing at the end of the day, if you wanted to do peanut butter jelly and this person was like, no, we need to do it this other way.
Yeah.
It was fine. It was so interesting to watch this happen. But you're right. Like when we all have this common language as to the why, if we're just talking about the how at that point, it's cake.
We're doing all right. Absolutely. My CI and the department head for the arts up here is a former band director. So there are times we've sat across from my desk and we've had like, well, no, I don't think it's that way. And then like we finished the conversation, like, okay, let's go get a cup of coffee, because we have a great relationship, because we're here for the same reason. We just have different trainings, different paths, and and that's great. I love it, because as Emerson says, and I'm not trying to like get all like quotey here, but I think it's Emerson. So I don't know. We'll have to research who this is. I'm pretty sure.
Fact check it.
Yeah, fact check this. But if all we are searching for is the truth, you can't. You're not harming me. If all I want to do is be better, I want the truth. You telling me I'm made a mistake, and then this is what, and you help me correct it. You haven't harmed me, so there's no need. Like if we have discourse, that's great. We're just trying to get better. We don't have to have the same how to that journey, and we might all grow. You might learn something.
That is definitely how we all grow and learn from each other. So that discourse, bring it on. If you are interested in working more with David and finding about his work, you can reach him at Twitter at DEK Conductor, as well as his email at dekconductor@gmail.com, all of which are in the program notes. Until next time, this is Jen Rafferty. Have a wonderful day. This podcast was brought to you by Jen Rafferty Music, cover art by Molly Reagan and Good Neighbor Art, and music by John Kiefner.